What if I tell you? For more than 6 long years, the skeptics and the critics had one final argument that they absolutely loved to use against us. It was their ultimate weapon to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the minds of pioneers. You remember what they said? They would look you right in the eye in the comment sections and say, "Listen, wake up. It doesn't matter if some little coffee shops accept Pi. It doesn't matter if you can trade it peer-to-peer for a used car. Because when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, the governments of the world will never allow it." They told us with absolute certainty that the state would crush us. They said governments would ban Pi entirely before they would ever let you pay your required taxes with what they sneeringly called magic internet money. They wanted you to believe the old financial system was invincible, that the dollar was untouchable, and that we were just wasting our precious time mining worthless tokens on our phones. But here's what they didn't know. While they were busy mocking us, something massive was happening behind closed doors in government offices around the world. And what I'm about to show you is going to completely destroy that final argument forever. While the masses were distracted by noise and daily drama, the entire global financial architecture shifted right underneath their feet without them even noticing. The new global banking standard, ISO 20022, is live, speaking the language of digital assets. The tough European regulations, known as MiCA, are here, and Pi is perfectly positioned for them, creating a safe lane for institutional adoption. The barriers that everyone said would stop us cold have completely vanished. But there's something even bigger happening that almost nobody is talking about yet, and it involves a specific economic crisis that's forcing governments to make decisions they never thought they'd have to make. We are no longer just talking about the utility of buying a cup of coffee with your phone. We are now talking about the ultimate form of financial legitimacy on planet Earth. We are talking about paying your government, paying your national taxes, and paying for essential public services using Pi Network. This is the moment everything changes. Today, I'm going to show you why nations are secretly preparing to integrate Pi, and why this is the final step before mainstream global adoption. But there's one massive piece of the puzzle that almost everyone has missed: a specific economic reality that explains exactly why this shift is happening right now. And when you understand this reality, the GCV number suddenly stops looking impossible and starts looking inevitable. Hello again, Pi Network pioneers. I'm your host, Nathan. Before dive deep into our video, let's greet and welcome my incredible pioneers from around the world. Whether you're watching from Nigeria, Papua New Guinea, United States, India, Philippines, Canada, Kenya, or anywhere else on this beautiful planet, I'm absolutely thrilled to share this incredible news with you today. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you're always in the loop with the latest Pi Network updates. And don't forget to drop a comment saying Pi Network to the moon, along with your country and flag. Let's fill the comments with pioneer pride and show the world how powerful and united our global community really is. So, let's dive right in. Welcome back, pioneers. Let's get real for a minute and ask the hard questions. Why on earth would a mighty government want your Pi? They have their own national currency, right? They have the printing press. They can just print more money if they need it. So why would they need what we've been holding on our phones for 6 years? The answer to this question is going to blow your mind. And it's connected to a crisis that's getting worse by the day in countries all over the world. Here's the secret that mainstream media and financial news channels won't tell you. Governments around the world are absolutely broke, and their systems for collecting money are totally outdated and inefficient. Think about how incredibly wasteful the current tax system is in almost every country. Collecting taxes is expensive. It takes an army of bureaucrats, endless paperwork, and outdated computer systems that barely talk to each other. It's incredibly slow. Money gets stuck in the banking system for days, sometimes weeks, before the Treasury can actually use it. And by the time that money reaches government accounts, inflation has already eaten away some of its value. And then there's the fraud. Massive, unchecked fraud happening on a scale that would shock most people. People hide money offshore in tax havens. Huge deals are done under the table in cash to avoid taxes. Businesses underreport their actual revenue, and the government loses billions upon billions of years simply because they cannot see what's actually happening in the real economy. They're operating blind. They're desperate for efficiency. They're desperate for a way to see transactions happen in real time and collect their share instantly. But their current systems make that impossible. So what did they try to do about it? And this is where the story gets really interesting. They saw crypto coming years ago. They knew blockchain was the answer to their efficiency problems. So what did they do? They tried to build their own version. You've heard of them, central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These are government-run, centralized cryptocurrencies. Countries all over the world spent billions developing these systems. They hired the best programmers. They ran pilot programs. They announced big launches with fanfare. And guess what happened? Almost everywhere they've been tried, from Nigeria to China to the Bahamas, they failed miserably to gain real adoption. Why did they fail? It's simple. Trust. The people do not trust them. People know that a CBDC is not freedom. It's a surveillance tool that lets the government control how, when, and where you spend your own money. Citizens can see exactly what these systems really are. They're tools for total financial control. The ability to freeze accounts instantly. The ability to see every transaction. The ability to implement negative interest rates or expiration dates on money. People rejected them. They refused to use them. And now governments are facing a massive problem that's only getting worse. So now the governments are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Their old fiat system is broken, slow, and bleeding money through inefficiency and fraud. Their new proposed system, CBDCs, is hated and rejected by the people they need to tax. They need a solution, and they need it fast. And that's where something absolutely wild is starting to happen behind the scenes in government offices around the world. But before I tell you what that is, you need to understand exactly what Pi has that governments desperately wish they had. Enter Pi Network. We have exactly what they wish they had, ready-made and waiting. We have over 35 million verified users holding and using the currency already.
That's adoption they cannot buy. That's adoption that took years to build organically. We have instant, low-cost global transactions that settle in seconds, not days, solving their efficiency crisis completely. We have mobile-first technology that works on the phones that billions of people already own, eliminating the need for expensive new infrastructure. And crucially, thanks to Dr. Nicholas's foresight to build this the hard way over 6 years, we have something no other decentralized network on Earth has. We have tens of millions of KYC-verified, real human identities tied to those wallets. Think about what that means from a government perspective. Governments love KYC. They cannot tax anonymity. They need to know who is paying what. Pi is the only decentralized, globally distributed network that gives them the compliance and transparency they need, wrapped in the modern technology they crave. We solved the exact problem their CBDCs couldn't solve. We built trust with users while maintaining verification and compliance. They're realizing they don't want to ban us. That's too hard, and frankly, it's too late. The cat's out of the bag. They want to use our infrastructure to fix their broken systems. And when you understand this shift in thinking, everything about the next few years starts to make perfect sense. But understanding why they need it is only half the battle. To prepare yourself, you need to know exactly who's going to pull the trigger first, because it's likely not the countries you might expect, and there's a specific pattern emerging that tells us exactly where this revolution begins. So who moves first? Who's going to be the first nation to shock the world and officially accept Pi for public payments and taxes? I can tell you right now, it probably won't be the US Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank tomorrow morning. Those giants move slow. They have entrenched interests. They have bureaucracy. This revolution starts at the edges, in the countries where the need is greatest and the pressure on their current system is highest. And when you see which countries fit this profile, you're going to realize this is happening much sooner than anyone expected. We're looking at 3 specific types of countries that are racing toward this reality, and at least one of them is going to make a major announcement within the next 12 months that changes everything. Let me break down exactly who they are and why they're positioned to move first. First, you have the emerging giants. I'm talking about massive economies with huge populations like Nigeria, Vietnam, and the Philippines. In these countries, the people have already spoken. They've already voted with their wallets. They've chosen crypto, and specifically Pi, over their failing local currencies that lose value every single day to inflation. The grassroots adoption in these regions is massive. You have millions of citizens already using Pi just to survive inflation and preserve their purchasing power. In these places, the government is falling behind its own citizens. The people have moved on to a better system. For these governments, accepting Pi for public services like driver's licenses, business registration fees, or small business taxes isn't really a choice anymore. It's becoming a necessity just to regain some economic control and recapture revenue from the real economy that has moved on to the blockchain. They're losing tax revenue because transactions are happening in Pi outside their system. So accepting Pi brings that activity back where they can see it and tax it. It's actually a smart move for them, and several of these countries are already in quiet discussions about exactly how to implement this. Second, you have the crypto-forward nations. These are countries following the El Salvador model. El Salvador made history by adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. They proved a nation could run on crypto and attract massive investment and global attention. It put them on the map, but let's be honest, Bitcoin is slow and expensive for everyday transactions. You aren't going to pay a small parking ticket with Bitcoin because the fees are too high, the confirmation times are too long. It works as a store of value, but not as a daily payment system. The next wave of countries looking for that competitive edge will look at Pi. Why? Because it's faster, it's energy efficient, it's mobile first, and crucially, it has a much bigger, ready-made user base inside their own borders ready to spend instantly. It's the practical evolution of what El Salvador started. These countries see the opportunity to position themselves as leaders in the new digital economy. And the first one to officially adopt Pi for government services is going to attract enormous investment, talent, and global attention. The race is heating up, and the smart money is watching these countries very carefully right now. Third, you have the global tech hubs, places like Dubai, Singapore, and Switzerland. These regions are fighting tooth and nail to be the financial capitals of the future. They know oil revenue won't last forever. They know traditional banking is changing. They're watching Europe closely. They see Pi's regulatory compliance with MiCA. They see the ISO integration. They understand what's coming. They know that institutional big money wants regulatory clarity above everything else. They see Pi as the safe, regulated option for integrating cryptocurrency into public infrastructure without causing chaos or violating international financial rules. They want to be first because being first means attracting the builders, the entrepreneurs, and the capital of the new economy. These are the places where the world's billionaires live and do business. If Dubai announces you can pay your business license fees in Pi, or Singapore announces you can pay certain taxes in Pi, the global signal that sends is absolutely massive. It tells every major institution in the world that Pi is legitimate, safe, and here to stay. The race is on. The first country to officially accept Pi for taxes becomes a major player in the new digital economy. And trust me, these countries are paying very close attention to each other, and nobody wants to be left behind. But even if these countries adopt Pi, there's still one massive question remaining that the critics always throw in my face. How does paying your taxes actually lead to that massive GCV price tag of $314,159? That doesn't make any sense. If governments are using it, wouldn't they want the price to be low so it's easy for people to acquire it and pay? If you think that, I'm sorry, but you do not understand national economics.
You're thinking like a retail consumer buying groceries, not like a central bank managing a national budget and international obligations. Let me explain exactly how this actually works, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. When a government accepts Pi for taxes, something fundamental changes in the nature of that coin. That Pi stops being just user money for buying things, and it becomes part of their national reserves. It becomes sovereign money that backs the credibility of the nation on the international stage. You have to understand the scale governments operate on. Governments don't deal in millions of dollars. They don't even deal in billions. They deal in trillions. National debts across the globe are enormous. The cost of building infrastructure, funding social programs, paying government salaries, and running defense budgets is astronomical. These are numbers that ordinary people can't even really comprehend. If a government is going to hold Pi on its balance sheet to back its national budget or pay off $1 billion international debt, they need an asset with immense value density. Think about it like this. You cannot run a nation's treasury on pennies. There isn't enough liquidity in the world to make that work. If Pi is worth $10 and a government needs to pay off a $10 billion debt to the IMF or another country, they would have to dump 1 billion PiCoins onto the market instantly to cover that debt. That would crash the price to zero and destroy their own reserves in the process. It doesn't work mathematically. The system breaks down completely. To function as a sovereign-grade asset capable of handling national-level economics, national debt obligations, and international trade settlement, the price per coin must be incredibly high to handle the volume without crashing the market. A high value, like the $314,159 figure the community supports, isn't just a fun number we made up or pulled out of thin air. It's absolutely required for Pi to operate at the sovereign level. It needs that high value so that smaller, manageable amounts of Pi can represent massive amounts of purchasing power for the state. Government adoption doesn't lower the price. It necessitates the GCV. It forces the value up because now Pi is backing the credibility and the debts of a nation-state. Let me give you a real-world example to make this crystal clear. Imagine a mid-sized country with a national budget of $50 billion per year. If that country decides to hold even just 10% of its reserves in Pi, that's $5 billion worth of Pi they need to acquire and hold. If Pi is worth $100 per coin, they need to acquire 50 million Pi tokens. That's a massive amount that would move markets dramatically. But if Pi is worth $100,000 per coin, they only need to acquire 50,000 Pi tokens. That's a manageable amount that can be acquired without causing massive market disruption. Now scale that up. What happens when 5 countries do this? 10 countries? 20 countries? What happens when Pi becomes recognized as a legitimate reserve asset that countries hold alongside gold and major currencies? The demand becomes absolutely massive. And remember, Pi has a fixed maximum supply. It can't be printed, it can't be inflated away. That scarcity, combined with sovereign-level demand, creates exactly the kind of price pressure that supports values that seem impossible today. This is why institutional analysts who actually understand reserve assets and national balance sheets look at Pi's potential and see numbers that retail investors think are crazy. Now that you understand why the price has to be high for this to work, you need to hear the final warning. Because the moment governments get involved and realize this math, a new danger appears for pioneers who aren't paying attention, and this danger could cost you everything you've worked for over the past 6 years if you're not prepared. Pioneers, we need to be very clear about what happens next in this narrative. When governments start accepting Pi, it validates everything we've worked for 6 years. It's the ultimate seal of approval that destroys all fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It proves the critics wrong in the most spectacular way possible, but it also creates the biggest danger zone you've faced since you started mining. And if you don't understand this danger, you could lose everything right at the moment of victory. When a government decides they need an asset for their national reserves, they don't announce it on Twitter first. They don't hold a press conference and tell everyone their strategy. Think about how central banks buy gold.
Do they announce ahead of time that they're going to buy 10 tons of gold next month? Absolutely not. They acquire it quietly, slowly, through back channels, because they want to get as much as possible at the lowest possible price before the market catches on to what they're doing. The same strategy will be used with Pi. We're about to enter a period where you might see official announcements that seem confusing or even negative. You might see regulations that seem designed to scare retail holders. You might see coordinated media campaigns spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt right when everything is actually coming together. You might see temporary price suppression or concerning headlines. Why? Because they want your Pi. The institutions want your Pi. And soon governments will want your Pi to fill their national treasuries and reserves. The ultimate tragedy of this entire journey would be holding for 6 years through all the ridicule, through all the waiting, through all the doubt, only to get scared and sell your Pi for pennies right before it becomes recognized as sovereign money, right before the value explodes because nations are competing to acquire it. You are holding the future financial rails for nations on your phone. Do not forget that value. Do not let anyone, any headline, any temporary fear shake you out of your position when we're this close to the finish line. You need to get your security in order right now. Make sure your passphrase is safely stored offline, written down where no hacker can find it. Make sure your KYC is finalized and your checklist is completely green. Make sure you understand how to secure your wallet properly. Don't give them any excuse to take what's yours or leave you behind when the transition happens. The greatest transfer of wealth in history is happening right now, quietly, while most people are completely distracted. The question is, will you still be holding when that transfer is complete? Or will you be one of the people who sold too early and has to watch from the sidelines? And this brings us to something absolutely critical that determines whether you win or lose in the next phase. Your ability to recognize what's really happening when governments start making their moves is going to separate the pioneers who change their lives from the pioneers who fumble at the goal line. So let me give you the exact signals to watch for so you know what's really happening behind the official announcements. Here's what to watch for in the coming months. First, pilot programs. When a government wants to test something without committing fully, they start a pilot program. Watch for announcements about small-scale testing of Pi for specific government services in specific regions. That's not just a test. That's the beginning of full adoption. They're working out the logistics before rolling it out nationwide. Second, regulatory clarity announcements. When countries start issuing clear guidelines about how Pi fits into their legal framework, that's not random. That's preparation for integration. They're building the legal foundation to make it official.
Third, statements from central banks about digital assets. When you hear central bank officials starting to talk about diversifying reserves or exploring digital assets beyond CBDCs, pay attention. That's them laying the groundwork for public acceptance. Fourth, bilateral agreements. Watch for trade agreements or economic partnerships between countries that mention digital assets or blockchain technology. That's nations preparing to transact with each other using assets like Pi. And fifth, sudden media attention. When mainstream news suddenly starts covering Pi more frequently, that's not organic, that's coordinated. Someone wants public awareness to increase, and it's usually because major announcements are coming. These signals tell you what's really happening behind the scenes. And when you start seeing multiple signals happening at once, you know we're entering the final phase. The phase where governments stop preparing and start implementing. The phase where adoption becomes official and the price starts reflecting Pi's true role in the global financial system. This is what separates the winners from those who sell too early. The ability to read what's actually happening instead of reacting to fear or short-term price movements. But there's one more thing you absolutely need to understand, and this is about timing, because the window of opportunity to accumulate Pi at current levels is closing faster than most people realize, and once it closes, it never opens again. Let me explain exactly why time is running out. Right now, today, you can still mine Pi for free. You can still accumulate without competition from institutions or governments. You can still position yourself before the vast majority of the world understands what's happening. But that window is closing, not because of some arbitrary date, but because of mathematics and inevitability. Once the first government officially announces Pi acceptance for taxes or public services, everything changes instantly. The cat's out of the bag. Institutions will scramble to acquire positions. Other governments will rush to follow so they're not left behind. The price will start reflecting Pi's true utility and scarcity. Mining rewards will become increasingly competitive as more people wake up to what's happening. And most importantly, the free accumulation phase ends. Once Pi is fully recognized as a legitimate asset, you can't mine it for free anymore. You have to buy it at market price, competing with institutions and governments who have billions to spend. That's why this moment, right now, is so critical. You're in the small window between Pi being built and Pi being recognized. The window between obscurity and mainstream adoption. The window between free accumulation and having to compete for every coin. History shows us this window is always smaller than people think. Bitcoin had this window in its early years. Ethereum had this window. And in both cases, the people who recognized the window and maximized their accumulation during that period changed their lives. The people who waited, who doubted, who stopped mining because it seemed pointless, they're the ones with regrets today. They're the ones who understand what they missed. Don't be that person. Don't let this window close while you're still on the fence. This is the endgame, pioneers. For years, we argued about utility in comment sections. We argued about whether local shops would accept it. That debate is over. We won that debate. Now we're moving to the highest level of the game. When governments accept Pi, when the tax authorities recognize it, the word scam gets erased from the history books forever. It becomes impossible for anyone to deny the reality of what Dr. Nicholas and this community have built together. We didn't just build a fun little crypto app to play with on our phones. We quietly, slowly, and methodically built the future financial rails for nations to stand on when their old systems finally collapse. We built the solution to problems that governments are desperately trying to solve. We built trust, verification, and scale that CBDCs couldn't achieve. We built exactly what the world needs at exactly the moment it needs it. And now the world is starting to realize what we've been holding all along. The infrastructure is ready. The regulators have cleared the path with MiCA and ISO standards. The governments are desperate for a solution to their broken financial models. The math requires high value for Pi to function at sovereign scale. The shift isn't just possible anymore, it's inevitable. It's just a matter of which country moves first and triggers the domino effect. You held through the doubt. You held through the silence. You held through the mockery and the criticism. Now hold for the ultimate vindication. Hold for the moment when governments around the world start competing to acquire the asset you've been mining for free on your phone. Make sure your Pi is secured. Make sure your verification is complete. Make sure you understand what you're holding and why it matters, because the next 12 to 24 months are going to be absolutely historic. The first government announcement is coming. The institutional scramble is coming. The moment of recognition is coming, and the pioneers who stayed consistent, who completed their security steps, who understood the vision, you're about to be proven right in the most spectacular way possible. If you're ready to pay your taxes with a tap on your phone and watch the old system adapt or get left behind, smash that like button right now. If you want to stay updated on every development as governments start making their moves, subscribe because the biggest announcements are still ahead. The critics said governments would ban us. Instead, governments are preparing to use us. We won.